Senator Dr. Charles.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I miss my colleague, my erstwhile colleague. I really wanted to look him in the face today, but I miss him. I talk about Minister of Finance, Minister of Finance. Once upon a time, he was an engineer. You see how few engineers find themselves in this business of politics that we have chosen to be in. Few do find themselves in this, and that's because the rules are so different. And that's why I said I missed him, because I wanted to remind him of the rules that we used to follow once upon a time in this profession, which plays a role in the development of nations, especially young nations like ours. And I remember a time I was never politically associated or aligned with his party, but I do remember fondly a time when some engineers like Ken Julian and others played major roles in taking us from one point to the next. And I thought I could tease him to end his silence on some of the things being said by the current Minister of Works. You see, everything is connected. I have some family members, my wife and her family, trying to get a property under the RPO, which they're long time in their family, for decades and decades. So there's never a dispute as to ownership. But you have to go under the RPO to have good title. They've been trying to do that for more than 10 years. I'm sure the Honorable Attorney General is so much aware of these things. And I wonder how it's connected. In this country, you could still get charged, and if you can't find money for bail, find yourself in jail for 15 years waiting for trial. No big deal. We're talking about flooding and power spray now for how many decades? Now we're talking about evacuating it. Something about evacuating power spray here when rain falls. You know any city in the world that could evacuate in an hour? What roads are you going to build to evacuate the city in an hour? Can't build any. Can't come up with any traffic plan for that. You see, we either want to build a nation or not. If we want to just continue with this tinkering and just slam the other side whenever you have a problem you can't solve, you boil corruption. It's the most common word to use now, corruption. Everything is corruption. They thief. I have never seen a former prime minister get battered like the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar. Everything, if you bounce your toe, it's Kamala's fault. Because it's so easy to just throw pelt objects at people. But if you want to build a nation, we recognize that these things are all connected. We don't have the ability, under this administration, as far as I can see, to tackle any big problem. Everything is tinkering. So you keep on talking about it forever, but you'll never solve it. You will talk for the next 20 years about the justice system, and you will still be spending 15 and 20 years in jail. In fact, every year it gets worse. You spend more and more time in jail. And if we look at the number of people who are processed by the system, you realize that the line is going to get longer and longer. It's a queue. It's going to get longer and longer, so it's going to get worse and worse into what is justice. Because what is justice after 20 years? And you can't see the connection between that and the numerous potholes everywhere. You can't find a solution to any big problem. Every single one of our connected. I heard the Honorable Minister just speaking about social issues and so on. I say, oh, wonderful. It's very easy to convince ourselves we're doing so much work by reading out all the little things that we're doing about all kinds of little things. And you're doing all these little things and everybody's busy. All the public servants are busy. And we have to praise them, they're working hard. But what is the result? Just step out there and you know the result. because I'm sure we're not always inside there. You know what kind of country we have today? We have an angry country. We have a frustrated country. We have a country in pain. How is all this tinkering dealing with that pain? Are you doing any infrastructure works in all these little communities where we used to have all kinds of things going on that will keep the guys occupied? When one of our heroes, Brian Lara, had lost a friend the other day, you know, he spoke about the fact that in his community, and I live in Santa Cruz, in his community, you don't have the skill, they don't have anything to do. All they have is what they're doing. A lot of communities like that. All they have is what they're doing right now. Who is teaching them? You can't just do it in the schools. These young people are going to be with us for the next 50 or 60 years. They're not going to go away. So you can't say you go and teach in the school. What are you doing about the young people? And upgrading their skills so they could do something. You know, when we were building the highway, I have so much I could say. I could speak for days here. And I know that's not allowed. I'm a Whip Van Winkler has come back here after a long time. And all the rules different. You can't talk for too long anymore. So I have to try to fit into 40 minutes. But you know, I don't know if the minister is aware that we couldn't even find skilled workers. A lot of things happen in this country. You can't find welders that you need, the number of welders you need. We couldn't find the number of operators of heavy vehicles for the highway. We had to bring people from abroad in here to drive vehicles. We had to ask the Transport Commissioner to give a dispensation to allow people with a lower rating in terms of heavy vehicles to drive a heavier vehicle. If we try to do anything on a big scale, we don't have the people to do it. We don't have the systems to do it. So I have to say, Minister of Works, congratulations on opening a section of the highway. Wonderful that you opened the 8-kilometer section of the highway. I personally love it, the fact that you did reach Point 14. I would have liked to be there when you reached Point 14. But I find the comments amazing. It's like a man praising himself for putting in the doors and windows, or the electricals and plumbing in a house that somebody else built from foundation. Don't have the decency to praise the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bissessar for starting that foundation, for having the guts to say, let us go and build the biggest project, because it's okay to talk about it.
Just as a reminder, we use titles. When we're referring to members of parliament, we use titles. So it's member of Superior or the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
My apologies. So you have to have that decency to recognize those who built the foundation of the house, built all the walls, put on the roof, so you could actually get to put in your doors and windows and your electricals. So when you're praising yourself for that, how dare you condemn them? I have to spend a little bit of my time here definitely speaking about the highway, because maybe I took too long to talk about it. But I will tell you something. I did start off answering some questions back in 2016. And what I found was every time I answer a question, about 5 ministers follow up repeating the same thing that they said before. How could I personally compete with 5 ministers all repeating the same thing, even if it's not true?
That is PNM.
Double down on propaganda. But I'm going to spend a few minutes on it. I want to start by saying that, yes, it's the biggest project that we have ever done in this country, and we ever attempted in this country, this project. And we had a lot of challenges. But we went at it. That's why I said we need to praise the former Prime Minister, who did in fact have the guts to go at it. And we could even say a good word for the man before who taught, that's to say the Honorable former Prime Minister, Honorable Patrick Manning. We could even say a good word for him because he thought he should take on 3 highways one time. 3 $5 billion highways one time. Without any idea where the money coming from, right? You know, we took on this highway project, and in 2008, there was a cabinet decision to proceed with the projects and so on. And in 2009, I think consultant, Trinidad Plan consultant was busy working at it. In 2010, there was a flurry of activity. in February 2010, they issued the request for proposals, February 26, 2010. They had a pre-submission meeting on March 22nd. Tenders closed on May 7th. Tenders closed on May 7th. That's the middle of the campaign, right? Election was the 24th. Tenders closed on May 7th. And there are 3 entries for that particular highway: China Railway Construction, Constructor OS, and GLF Construction. The bids range from 5.28 billion to 6.36 billion. The Tender Evaluation Committee recommended on May 13th, 2010, that NIDCO enter into negotiation with Constructor OS. After submitting the recommendation to the Ministry of Works, that's why I wanted the former Minister of Works, to be able to smile at him, because he was there. It was sent to his ministry. May 13th. So you close tenders on May 7th. By May 13th, you already evaluate.
What?
And you send it to the ministry and already get back the response and give out your recommendation and so on. And OS was written to on May 25th.
Yeah, them special, you know, special.
May 25th, 1 day after the election. May 25th.
Swearing yet.
No government is swearing yet. May 25th. You pelting stone. You have glasses, but you pelting stone. On May 25th. Within a period of a week or two, you do all the evaluation in a hurry, and by May 25th, a day after the election, you can't wait. And you send out instructions to 3 different contractors. Do you think it's OS alone? 3 contractors were awarded, 1 for the highway to Point Fortin, but 2 others for the one to Mazilla and the one to Mayaro, to Princess Town. All in the same range of 5 billion. You send out awards to all 3 of them a day after the election. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, them.
And the Minister of Finance that we have today, he doesn't say a word, no matter what is said on this highway. He says nothing. I have all the cabinet notes here to show all the progression, all the acquisition that they want to have. All the acquisition committee they want to have are so waiting on it so long. 6 years now waiting on it. So that we have a forum, a neutral forum, not a political forum, a neutral forum, where professional people can actually stand up and speak to each other about what went on with this project, which is such a challenge for our country. Our small country decided to take on a project of this magnitude. You will not reach anywhere as a country if you don't learn how to take on projects of this magnitude. You will continue tinkering with problems, with big problems, with little things all the time and never could get anywhere. And that's why I made the point about the fact that up and now, you still have to spend 15 or 20 years in jail because you cannot solve anything. You can't solve anything big. You could only tinker. When faced with a big challenge, the people who take on the challenge, all you have to say about them are dirty words. Dirty words, the worst kinds of things, as though they are big crooks and thieves.
Lies.
As though we so love OS. Who is OS? I have no idea who they are. I did not know who they are. I met them for the first time in 2010.
You wasn't there.
For the very first time in my life.
One second. Members, Senator Roberts. Senator Charles is making his contribution, and can we temper the crosstalk on both sides to allow Senator Charles to make his contribution? Continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Come from a time when we love crosstalk, but sorry.
Santa Claus.
Yes, Mr. President. So I'm saying that, you know, all these things that have to be said, all these dirty words have to be said, don't help us as a nation. I really thought I was so privileged in 2010. I didn't want the job as president of NIDCO. I really didn't want it. But I took it because I'm a disciplined person, and I said, I'll do it. We'll go at it. And then I felt so privileged because I said, here I have the opportunity to take a project that was conceived under the previous administration, tendered under them, awarded by them,
Say that again.
and then I get to build it.
I ain't hear that part.
You cannot reach anywhere as a nation if you don't learn how to take on big things and carry them from administration to administration. What do you think you could do in 5 years?
Continuity.
What problem you could solve in 5 years as a country if you really care about the people in this country?
Continuity, I love it.
You have to take up something and be able to be mature enough, be disciplined enough, be honest enough to take it from administration to administration. You could criticize each other as you go, but why are you calling us all these kinds of things when none of it is justified? Now, the previous minister and his team even had the wisdom of bringing to this country a company called ACOM. At that time, the largest engineering consultancy company in the world.
With email game.
And we kept them here on the job, and they are still here on the job. And why I call them ACOM,
Was awarded
this American giant,
PNM.
because they are the ones who have to certify every single payment made to OS without exception must be certified and come from ACOM. And ACOM has indicated in writing, at no time was OS overpaid. Why you keep on saying that they were paid $5 billion and the job only reached half? When that is not true, when the total amount of money ever received on the job was $5.1 billion, $500 million gone for acquisition, how much 100 million gone for ACOM themselves, how many 100 million gone for other things like oil wells and all these things. How could OS get that when that's all the money that was received? Why are you making these things up?
Dishonest.
You see, Mr. President, my problem. How are we going to build if we start on this level? I don't want to use the wrong language, you see. How are we going to build if we start on this level? We know that the highway had reached 61% completion. How do we know that? We know that because NIDCO and the ACOM came to the Parliament, reporting to our Parliament committee and said so. And a certain minister was upset after that, and he ran on to NIDCO office afterwards. To get on bad down there because they didn't like the fact that they said that they reached 61%.
Yes.
But at the end of 2015, they had reached 61%. It's all there, the documentation is there to support it. They had reached 61% and they had been paid 61% of the money. Because the ACOM couldn't do otherwise, they're the ones who have to certify the payment. If they certify more payment, then they can be taking the task for that. So stop saying that we overpaid. We paid exactly for the work that was done. Our OS is not any company that we were all in love with, because as I said, we have no idea who they are, how they got here. Why you selected them to invite them to tender? Maybe they can explain that. Why did you select OS to invite them to tender? Since we don't know them at all. But you may have had a good reason. Previous administration may have had a good reason. And the Minister of Finance, who previous Minister of Works, may have had a good reason for inviting them to tender.
We don't want to ask you, we want to ask him. Yes. Just like the Sioux and the three other boats.
They came and they tendered here, and they had one contractor they chose as the one to be the sole contractor for all local work. They signed a contract to have one contractor as their subcontractor. Imagine that. They tender, they get the award, and in their proposal, one contractor was allowed to be the only. He had a deal to be the sole subcontractor on this job.
Wow. It's one of them who built in Balize House. There is one. You go find
Senator Roberts again. Senator Roberts. Senator Charles is the only one on the floor right now making a contribution. It doesn't mean that there needs to be crosstalk between anybody who is not on the floor speaking. Allow Senator Charles to make his contribution. Continue.
Mr. President, again.
Minister, ask my question. Sorry.
Yeah. So I don't want to say anything along that line, really, just to say that this is an amazing arrangement to have. We couldn't go with that arrangement, of course, and we ended up having a lot of local contractors work on the job. Lots and lots of people. Why you fell out of love with OS? Why they fell out of love with OS? I don't know. But they obviously did, because there was so much venom directed towards OS.
They didn't sit on the red couch.
So much so want us to fire them because they filed for judicial reorganization. I spoke about that issue before. So because you file for judicial reorganization doesn't mean that you have to be fired from a job. What's the meaning of judicial reorganization if you have to be fired for all your jobs? Then it will lose its purpose. Under judicial reorganization, what they call Chapter 11, you are allowed to continue your works and your obligations are managed under an arrangement before the courts. So you meet your obligation and you can continue restructuring your company and so on. That's the purpose of judicial reorganization. If when you file judicial reorganization, all your contracts are terminated, then it has no purpose. But in countries where they value business entrepreneurship, they have the laws that allow for judicial reorganization for a company that's in difficulty, not to just be sent into bankruptcy. And we would do well to introduce such laws in our country if we want to be a progressive country as far as business entrepreneurship is concerned. All these entrepreneurs you want to see. Minister of Trade and Industry, who was just speaking about business entrepreneurship, all this business entrepreneurship you want to have. Those are the things that they do to facilitate it. So when people are in financial difficulty and they don't have a godfather, they don't belong to some particular privileged group or something like that, so they don't have a godfather. But they're in difficulty, they won't just crash and be garbage for the rest of their life. Because when you're declared bankrupt, you're garbage for the rest of your life. Chapter 11 allows you to protect yourself when you're in difficulty and to work your way out of it. Meet your obligations under an arrangement in the courts. And that is what they did. So you don't have to fire them. Instead, the same consultant was asked, and it is again in writing, whether that company is in a position to continue the works. And they said yes, under certain conditions. And they were able to continue the works. All we did was to make sure, again on the advice of the same consultant, they are paid exactly for what work they did. Until we got to the point where we said, listen, we don't want to extend the contract any further. We have a certain period of time your contract will come to an end. We'll put in place a number of nominated subcontractors, so major local contractors in the country can complete the job as subcontractors to the main contractor. I'm not saying that what we did was perfect. We were faced with a unique situation, the first ever in this country to manage a project of this magnitude in 4 years. And people worked, all these ministerial works officials that the minister likes to praise. Many of them want the same job. And the people who were at NITCO themselves, some of them came from the same ministerial works, including the person who was the head of engineering, and the man who was the head of the highway. All those people came from the ministerial works. Engineers who had their careers in that field, in the government service, that rallied towards getting this project, this great challenge that we had, delivered to the people in record time. Did they tell the minister about the capping of oil wells, about the relocation of pipelines, that highway section you just finished? You know how far we had gotten for you to be able to finish that now? Mr. President, I don't mean you, but
Tell him.
the Honorable Minister.
Tell him like
you know how far we gotten with those things in order for that to be finished? Did the minister have to cap any oil well? How much oil well did he have to cap?
Answer now.
You know, Petrotrin couldn't even find their pipelines.
He was down in Palms in the land.
The pipelines weren't even all on the maps. Because you remember, we have an old oil industry in this country, going back to how many years before Petrotrin and Texaco and whatever. They could not even find all the oil wells on the map. So we would go out there and work, and they'll bounce a oil well, or they'll bounce a pipeline. All that work, that's why I said the people build the foundation, they build the house, they put on the roof, and then you come and put on the doors and windows. So great, pat yourself on the back, you did great. But what about the house that was built? How did you get there? Instead of all these dirty words, appreciate the effort made to take on this magnitude of a project. And the people who were bold enough to do it. And let us learn some lessons from it. So what you really ought to have had was a professional setting in which people could actually learn some lessons. Those same officers in the Ministry of Works could have mounted a professional setting. You don't have to invite Carson, Charles. You could invite the officers of people in NIDCO who are working on the project manager and the head of the highway and the chief engineers and so on, to tell you what they had to go through, to tell you the lessons they learned. We took the top people at the university as our consultants. Dr. Gay and the now deceased Raymond Charles, tops in the country in road, asphalt works and so on, right? And former lecturer at the university. We took them all as our consultants. All the top people we could find in Trinidad, we took as our consultants to work on this project, to try to deliver it for the country. This is how we will do big things, by learning lessons from what went before, not by castigating people with untruths, with things that are not accurate. Now, despite all the terms that were used, I would say, Mr. President, I, for one, am very proud that I had this unique opportunity to build 61% of this highway. And I praise the former administration as well as the current one. The current one that was able to continue it in part. But I ask you, what about this segment from Pinal to Mondesi? What about that segment? I didn't come up with that segment. The original consultants for the highway, if you're talking about the 1967 plan, the original consultants, Children Plan consultants, they are the ones who came up with that. They are the ones who said, this is where the actual highway will pass. That section down the creek is an upgrade of the road on the creek. And the highway, the main highway, is supposed to pass through Debe, Pinal, Separia, Faizabad, Mondesi, and down the road to Point Fortin. And that is what is in writing. That is in writing as well. So I ask the question, if you think you finish the highway, what about this segment from Pinal to Mondesi? Are you going to build it?
No, I thought UNC did it.
If you are building it, it's all right. If you don't have the money, say so. So let me come to the money part.
Rishi, go and read something.
This $1 billion talk, and this clause that was removed from the contract, you know full well no clause was removed from the contract. Addendum 2 did not remove any clause. I've said it over and over. What happened? It did not. No clause was removed. No, I'm telling you. The clause was not actually removed.
Ignore them.
What happened is that
51-1.
there were consequences to entering into negotiations and to deciding that you are going to continue with the works. The obvious consequences of that. So it's not a matter, some kind of simple matter of removing a clause. No. There are consequences to deciding that you're not going to terminate under what you think is bankruptcy or judicial reorganization, and you think you want to terminate under that, which is optional. But if you decide you're not going to do it, you'll have to find a different way to terminate if you want to terminate. And there are ways to terminate a contract. If you terminate the contract by first starving the contractor money, and after you get no money and he can't work, you don't terminate him for non-performance, well, you could probably estimate what will happen after that.
Well,
I wouldn't have to say what will happen after that. But I can tell you, I was there until December 2015, and we did not get a red cent from a new administration for the highway. I doubt very much they got any money after I left. So I don't think the contractor was paid. I don't want to go into the issues that are before arbitrators and courts and so on. I am just saying that there are ways to terminate. And if you choose to terminate in a particular manner, you will have to face the consequences of how you chose to terminate. Why didn't you consider other ways of terminating, or even maybe if you weren't so angry and upset at the time. You may have had some consultation, some discussion. You might have found out some kind of ways of terminating. If you wanted to terminate, it was always optional. But you chose to terminate in a fashion which has led to some consequences. What are the consequences? This talk about $1 billion that the people are trying to go to other face, and people's children and grandchildren think. What is that? That is a lot of rubbish. When you terminated, what happened is that you seized the bonds. You seized their bonds. The bonds that they put up is their money you took. You seized bonds which the arbitration panel then said you should not have seized, give it back. Why are you saying that there's some $1 billion bill that we have to meet? They simply said you took the people money, give it back because you terminated in a way that they don't agree with. I'm not commenting on whether your termination was the right way or the wrong way. I'm just saying there are different ways to terminate. And the one you chose to use to terminate, the arbitration panel didn't agree with. So they said, the bonds that you seize, give it back. Now, how were you able to seize bonds and now people telling you to give it back? You were able to seize bonds because we put in place irrevocable and unconditional guarantees. We put those things in place. We had the experience before, not in my time, but from reading the history, and the officers explained that they had the experience sometimes of having contractors put up bonds. Remember what happened with contractors? You pay them 10%, 20%. In the case of Vinci Grants, I think they pay them 35%. But they make a lot of noise now about the 20%. But they pay Vinci Grant 35%. Advance payment. I have no argument about the percentage you pay because the percentage you pay is covered by bonds. It's fully secured. You pay that percentage because the contractor estimates a certain level of risk. So you say, all right, if you're going to have that amount of money up front, you're going to have to put bonds in place to cover it. You put in place bonds, and then there was the experience previously where when they went to seize the bonds, the banks began to raise all kinds of questions about whether it is justified or it is not justified about the bonds and so on. With that experience in hand, we took action, appropriate action, including sending our legal team to the United Kingdom to meet with consultants there as well, legal consultants, because the matters have to be addressed in UK court. Under the contract, it's very clear. Matters of dispute are addressed in UK court. Because the contractor from Brazil, we are in Trinidad and Tobago, that was the agreement, right? So we sent our legal team to go and ensure that they have the understanding of the courts, of how it will be viewed in the courts in the UK in case the matter becomes contentious. And we were satisfied that the wording of the securities that were put was such that the bonds were unconditional and irrevocable. It meant that when you go to seize the bonds, the contractor has absolutely no say in it, even if you are seizing them unfairly. Because you wanted the people of Trinidad to have that protection for the 20% advance payment they were putting out. All the bonds, performance bonds, retention bonds, all of them unconditional and irrevocable. It didn't mean that you could just go and grab them. It meant you have to use them responsibly. But when you went and took them, you were within your right to do so. But don't pretend it is Trinidad citizens' money or something that you have to pay. It is OAS money that you took. And if you are right, you will get to keep it. And if you are wrong, you will have to return it. It's simple as that. And I really wish we could get a little more
truth from them.
It's frustrating. Why we have to do it this way?
Well, the Prime Minister,
Mr. President,
the Prime Minister is a liar, you know.
the project was executed against tremendous challenge. Oil wells, gas corridors across, pipelines to move, major TNTech facilities in that part of the country to relocate, highway reroute movement, acquisition challenge. I challenge them.
Senator, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. I challenge them to tell me if we were able to acquire 500 properties in about 3 or 4 years, how many you acquired in the past 8 years?
Tell them answer that.
The former Minister of Works is the man who knows about acquisition, because the acquisition process we followed is the one that he went to cabinet in the previous administration. Here he is, he come at the end of my speech. Is the one that he went to cabinet to have them approve, understanding the challenge of acquisition and the importance of doing private treaty. He went to cabinet to have them approve that, and that is what we put in place. The same private treaty arrangement, which I'm sure you have to come back and use, no matter how much you don't want it. I'm sure you have to come back and use private treaty. It's always a challenge, otherwise you cannot get so many acquisitions done in that period of time. You will take forever to do it. The commission evaluation just ain't able to handle that workload. So the decision to do private treaty wasn't done by the administration under the current member for Superior. It was a decision taken prior, and we stuck to it because it made sense. So at least own up to it. Own up, take possession of it. Take possession of what you put in place, which I thought was a good idea. Take possession of the OS that you brought here, which you will know if it's a good idea or not that they brought OS here. Take possession of the award you made, if you're going to take possession of the opening of the highway to Point Fortin. That's how I see it, Mr. President. A whole world of things in infrastructure, but I only want to end on one note, which is, I really think that we should be more mature now, to the point where if we look at the scale of the problems facing us in this country, we learn to put aside all of the mud throwing, all the petty squabbles, stick to the facts, express difference of opinions honestly, so we could actually find answers to what we're facing. Because what we're facing in every possible sector in this country is a nation in pain, a nation under virtual siege. And if they can't really do anything about it, well,
We can.
it won't take too long again.